Good evening and welcome to the City of Woodstock Public Planning Meeting. Tonight's meeting is an open public meeting as required by the Planning Act. This meeting is for information and discussion purposes only, and no decision will be made this evening. Council will make a decision on these matters at the regular council meeting to be held this Friday or this Thursday. I'm not coming Friday. If you also wish to address council at the meeting, you must submit a delegation form no later than 2 p.m. on Tuesday. A delegation form is available on the city's website. If you wish to comment at tonight's meeting, you must do so from the podium. Please refrain from providing comments from the gallery. Only comments provided at the podium will be recorded in the minutes, and you must provide your name and address for the public record before giving comments. Only the applicant or people who provide oral or written comments regarding the application are entitled to appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Please keep your comments to planning matters only and avoid repeating comments that have been expressed by others. We ask that you sign in at the back for the appropriate application if you wish to receive formal notice of council's decision on the matter. The notice will provide further information on appealing the decision. Prior to starting, are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Thank you. Do you want to state your reason?
Yes, I'm going to declare a possible perceived conflict of interest due to my ownership of a home in that immediate area of item number 2C, SB 22-05-8, ZN 8-22-21.
Thank you. So the first application that we have to deal with is B22-77-8, A22-17-8, application for consent and minor variance 1967113 Ontario Inc., 24 Bain Street. I'll ask for our planner to come forward and present this application.
Good evening, council, staff, members of the public. As the chair mentioned, this is application for consent and minor variance B22-77-8 and A22-17-8 in the name of 1967113 Ontario Inc. The subject lands are described as Lot 4, Plan 246, Lot 15, Plan 227, Part Lot 16, Plan 227, Part Lane, Plan 227, and the subject lands are municipally known as 24 Bain Street. The subject lands are designated low-density residential in Woodstock's in the Oxford County's official plan, and are zoned residential 2 in Oxford County zoning, or in Woodstock zoning bylaw. The purpose of the application for consent is to create a lot for residential purposes and to retain a lot containing an existing single-family dwelling. A semi-detached dwelling is proposed for the lots. Is proposed to be constructed on the lots to be severed. The applicant is proposing relief from section 7.2, table 7.2 R2 zone provisions to reduce the minimum required lot frontage for the lot to be retained from 9 meters to 7.3 meters. To reduce the minimum required lot frontage from the lot to be severed from 18 meters to 15.7 meters, and to reduce the required interior side yard width for the proposed and retained lands from 3 meters to 1.8 meters. The proposed severance is considered a form of infill housing. Infill housing is identified as the placement of new residential development, including the creation of a new lot, into established built-up areas on vacant or underutilized sites. In order to efficiently utilize the land supply designated for residential uses in municipal servicing and infrastructure, infill housing is supported by the low-density residential designation. In consideration of the request of minor variance, lot frontage and side yard width, staff have reviewed the proposal in the context of the policies contained in the official plan and are of the opinion that the proposed variances are appropriate and adequately, as they provide adequately sized lots and provide sufficient setbacks from neighboring properties and space for off-street parking to the existing dwelling. In particular, in this case, when houses do not have a garage, we request a side yard setback of 3 meters so that people can park beside their house. The 1.8 meter setback that is requested is further back, is a part of the dwelling that's further back on the site. So it allows you to park a vehicle beside the dwelling closer to the front of the site. So that 3 meter intent is maintained that way. The existing lot fabric in the vicinity is characterized by varying lot frontage steps and areas, and proposed lot to be 7 retained will not be out of place with the characteristics of the surrounding area. The city's building division provided comments identifying concerns with the lot layout. Through the commenting process, the applicant modified his proposed severance, and the building department is now satisfied with the proposed severance. In light of the foregoing, planning staff are recommending approval of the applications.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council through to the planner? Hearing none. Would the applicant be here? And would you like to come forward and speak? And we'll have to take your name and address, please.
Yes, Madam Chairman. My name is Dennis Burleese. I'm at 550 Finkel Street here in Woodstock. I'm a planner representing Mr. Amir Senchek, who is the proponent of this application. We're proposing an infilling situation where there's an existing house and a vacant parcel of land, which is large enough to permit the construction of a semi-detached dwelling. The variances will permit the proper planning of retaining the existing dwelling as well as the proposed dwelling construction. The planners have outlined that the variances that are proposed meet the tests that are required to satisfy the minor variance approval. And the municipal staff had some questions initially about the application, which we have answered. We would also like to answer any questions that you may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of council? No, seeing
Thank you
none.
very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak against the application? Okay, thank you. And this will be heard at council on Thursday evening. The next application is for application for official plan amendment OP 22-23-8 zone change ZN 822-17 1666144 Ontario Limited and 5034133 Ontario Limited. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So as mentioned, the applications for official plan amendment and zone change in the name of 1666144 Ontario Limited and 5034133 Ontario Limited. The subject lands are legally described as Part Block A, Plan 160, Parts 3 to 10, 41R 9470, Concession 1, East Oxford, Part Lots 7, 8, 11, and 12, north side of Henry Street, Plan 212 in the city of Woodstock. The lands are located at the northeast corner of Henry Street and Victoria Street North and immediately south of the CN rail line. The subject lands are designated traditional industrial in the city of Woodstock or in Oxford County's official plan. And the proposed designation here is special service commercial. The subject lands are zoned special highway commercial and special traditional industrial, and the requested zoning is special highway commercial. The special highway commercial that exists on part of the subject lands is C452. It's proposed that the entirety of the subject lands will be rezoned to that, and with a few of the special provisions changed. Applications have been received to amend the official plan to the city's zoning bylaw to permit a mixed-use commercial and residential development comprising potentially 2 dwellings located on separate parcels containing first-floor commercial units and a maximum of 30 dwelling units per building. So right now, the subject lands are being assembled. If you can see underneath of the mapping there are some property lines that are not exactly the same as what we've shown in the zoning here. The applicant is consolidating those lands to come up with 2 separate parcels so that there's enough space to contain these structures on each separate property. A number of factors limit the site's ability to be immediately developed. 2 severance required to consolidate the lands for proposed development have not yet been completed. A record of site condition is required to ensure that the lands are not contaminated prior to residential development. And potential mitigation measures are required from the CN property to ensure that development is appropriately set back from CN. The applicants have been working with CN to establish what that is. There's a proposal for a crash wall there. And so as a condition, we're going to put a holding provision to make sure that is designed to the appropriate standard that CN is satisfied with. So the subject applications propose 2 6-story 30 units mixed residential commercial buildings, as well as the application requires a zone change to permit the residential uses, a maximum height and reduced setback for parking areas and a proposed accessory structure. It is the opinion of staff that the proposed development is a form of mixed-use development, including commercial and residential uses. The development is also considered to be an efficient use of lands, municipal services, and infrastructure within a designated settlement area. Planning staff are of the opinion that the subject proposal is consistent with the policies of the PPS, as the development is an efficient use of land within a settlement area. With respect to PPS policies, the sensitive land uses and compatibility with major facilities, given the location of the subject lands being adjacent to low density development to the south, staff are of the opinion that the proposed redesignation for residential purposes is more favorable than the introduction of industrial uses to the residential neighborhood. Further, the limited area of the industrial lands is not suited to many modern industrial uses. So whenever we try to take, whenever we go to take employment lands like industrial lands out of employment land uses and convert them to residential uses, we generally do a comprehensive study to make sure that Woodstock still has enough employment land use. Through the Hemson study that was completed and adopted by council in 2022, additional lands were brought into the city of Woodstock that compensates for the amount of employment lands that are lost here. So staff are able to recommend conversion of those lands from employment use to mixed use residential and commercial uses. So although the service commercial designation, which is being proposed here, permits accessory residential uses, the significant number of residential uses are proposed, so 30 potentially per building, that requires us to add a special provision to it so that we can recognize that these residential uses are not accessory the way we think about them, but are a significant number of residential uses more than that. So in particular, on the western parcel, the proposed density is equal to a medium density residential site, and on the eastern parcel, the proposed density would be equal to a high density residential site. So generally, those types of residential uses require you to be close or on a collector road. So in this case, Henry Street turns into Wellington Street, which is a major collector road in Woodstock fairly quickly after the subject lands. Within the zoning, the applicants are proposing a maximum of 30 dwelling units, like I said, where accessory dwelling units are contemplated. They're proposing a maximum of 23 meters in height to accommodate the potential of a 6-story building where 11 meters is currently permitted. They're requesting a variance from the parking areas. So from the interior lot line, 1.5 meters is a typical setback, and they're proposing nil for the property that is shared with the C452 zone. So the property line in between the two parcels that are shown there would have a nil setback. The properties would essentially be campus together and function on their own, although we intend for them to meet the zone provisions of each site. The zone provisions for the street line are also nil. And again, these are zone provisions that are carried forward from the existing special provision zoning that's on the property now. They're also proposing an accessory structure to be used for residential uses of 155 square meters. They've also requested that it's likely that only one of these properties will contain that accessory structure. In this case, it's proposed as a pergola type structure. So that could be used by the residents of either lot, even though it's only likely to be on one lot. The requested increase to the maximum height of the buildings is considered to be appropriate for properties on the north side of Henry Street, as that are generally of minor industrial use and will not be impacted by increased height of the proposed building. Further, shadows created by increased building height are usually impacted by properties to the north. And in this case, the property to the immediate north, which would be most affected, is the CN rail line, and they won't experience any negative effects from that. The applicant has requested decreased setbacks for parking areas that are adjacent to interior lot line and street fronting lot lines. These provisions are carried forward from the existing special provisions and aren't anticipated to have a negative setback or negative impact to the property either. Finally, the applicants have specifically requested to establish a 155 square meter accessory structure to serve as amenity space for the residential units. And as I said, the applicants have proposed this on one of the parcels, but it's tended to be utilized by residents of either property should both buildings be built out. Based on the preliminary site plan provided by the applicant, it appears that the proposal is in keeping with all the other relevant provisions of the zone as they relate to parking, lot area, lot coverage, amenity area, and landscaped open space. With respect to the comments staff have received, this development proposal, it will also be subject to site plan approval. So details regarding things like servicing, drainage, fire will be looked at further during the site plan approval process.
Thank you. Are there any questions of council? Mayor Accioni.
Thank you. I'm going to let you catch your breath there. First off, I'll start with the crash wall. Is that part of the drawing? Like, I'm looking at the drawings and it looks like there's a wall outside of the parking area. Is that what that is? If I may, or is that still not known if it's going to be required or not?
So through the chair, a mitigation measures of some sort will be required by CN. I think that might be a fence that's shown there, but a crash wall has been designed and is being reviewed, has been reviewed by CN to meet their satisfaction. I've been part of emails that shows the crash wall design. But we've included as a condition of a holding provision to make sure that those things are in place before development can proceed. So Jay McGuffin, I think, is the planner for the application. So he can probably give you some more details on that. But yes, that is what is intended, and that's where it's intended to be.
Okay, if I can continue with you. If I may, through the chair. There's no question residential is needed, right? So recognizing this space for residential homes is fantastic. Now, do we know at this point if they are apartments like to be rented, owned? We know that, or is that a planner question as well?
Yeah, I think that Jay is probably the best person to answer that question. But my contact through the applicant is that it intends to be a rental structure. I've never talked to them about condo structuring or anything like that. But Jay can probably provide the most up-to-date information from the applicant on that.
Sure. Yeah. I see what's in there. So, and the last question for you. Part of the site plan approval, will that include any traffic studies?
So through the chair, no. The number of units that are proposed here don't sort of meet the minimum criteria when the engineering department asks for traffic studies.
I thought it would. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of council? No? Hearing none. Is the applicant here? Then would you like to come forward and give your name and address, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jay McGuffin, Principal Planner, Vice President, Monteith Brown Planning Consultants. I'm here this evening representing the two numbered companies that are owners of both of the abutting properties. I've had an opportunity to review the planner's report and recommendations, and we support the recommendations as proposed. And I'm here to respond to any questions. I can respond to questions on the floor that have been deferred if you may.
Yes, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair. Is my understanding that the units are proposed to be rental. I have not been, just like the city planner, I have not been approached with regard to any condominium ownership or structure. Having said that, that does preclude a future application or a conversion at some point in the time, but at this point in time, the consideration is for rental.
If I may.
Yes.
I'm just curious then, is there possibilities of some affordability pieces being optioned there through the county programs, or do you know of any of that being already discussed?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not aware of that being discussed. I think there's always opportunities, whether or not it's an opportunity that our client is looking at pursuing. I know that it does come with some strings attached, but it's certainly something that we can bring back to our client to have him give consideration to. I'm not sure if it's part of the pro forma, but certainly can make him aware of any programs that the county has available to him.
I would certainly ask that you do and bring it up and know the
Absolutely.
county is looking to invest in certain projects to help with that affordability piece. So
Absolutely.
I would love to see any opportunity.
Yeah,
Any
through,
project you're working on, Jay.
through you, Madam
That
Chair,
was too subtle.
the proposal is for I'm going off memory, but I think it's 18, get my math right here, 18 single bed units and 12 double bedroom units in each building. That's the current composition.
I figured it must have been something similar to that, just based on size and
Yeah.
everything. So I think they might be ideal for,
Six units a floor, I think.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Leatherborough?
Your chair to Mr. J. Sorry, I forget your last name.
That's okay, Mr. J. It's good.
Okay.
It's last name's McGuffin.
Mr. J. On page 20 of 49, or I'm not sure if it's in front of you, but I noticed agency comments, Western Public Health mentions a proposed residential pool. And any commercial businesses that will eventually be established on the main floor, et cetera, comply with all regulations under the Health Protection and Promotion Act. I did not see a pool in the plan. Is that part of it, or is that?
There was a discussion by the proponent that the building on the two-story portion of the one building, I believe it's on the east side, would either be utilized as an at-grade garage for the building and loading area for the building for the commercial uses, or alternatively utilized as a pool that would serve the residents of both buildings. There's been no definitive answer as to whether or not it will be one or the other at this point in time. I think they're still exploring their options in terms of what the pro forma looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there, Councillor Wismer Van Meer?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. McGuffin. Just a couple of quick questions. I really like the idea of having the commercial with residential over top. I think something you've seen some other communities that works well, and that would be a great idea to see, especially in that area close to the downtown, a great spot and a nice commuting location for those who might be utilizing the via next door. The old, I'm going to call it the old zoo building, because that was the establishment when I was a teenager and visited quite frequently. Is that building going to be are you going to build on top of that? Is that building going to be used, or is that going to come down to construct a new unit?
My understanding is the majority of the building is likely to be redeveloped, but again, I don't want to be misquoted. So it could be some element of both, or it could be removed and replaced. Again, I think some of this is going to boil down to the pro forma at the time of the site plan and when the money has to come in for the investment of the construction.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak against this application? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to the next application. And that is SB 22-05-8 and ZN 8-22-21. Application for draft plan of subdivision and zone change, Reeves Land Corporation.
Brought my water with me this time.
Okay.
So applications for draft plan of subdivision and zone change, SB 22058 and ZN 82221 in the name of Reeves Land Corporation. The subject lands are described as lots 6, 7, 8, 15, 16, and 17, Plan 49, the city of Woodstock. The subject lands are bound by Riddle Street to the west, Vincent Street to the north, Wellington Street to the east, and Brant Street to the south. The subject lands are designated residential and low-density residential in the county's official plan. And the existing zoning is a special provisioned R2 and R3 lands, and variations to those R2 and 3 zones are what's proposed in the zoning amendment portion of this application. So the application for the draft plan of subdivision proposes to facilitate the development of a residential plan of subdivision comprised of 23 lots for single attached dwellings and 44 townhouse units and one new street between Riddle Street and Wellington Street, located 3/4 of the way north through the property. Planning staff are of the opinion that the subject proposal is consistent with the policies of the PPS, as the development is an efficient use of land and services within a settlement area. The development also contributes to housing types and densities required to meet the projected requirements of the current and future city needs of the city and the broader regional market. The subject lands are designated low residential, as I mentioned. And through the subject lands are the site of the former Woodstock Hospital. Through an extensive process, including the province when the province owned them. That's how we came up with the existing special provision zones that are on the property. And staff are generally satisfied with most of the provisions to amend those zoning applications. Through previous planning processes, the potential traffic generation resulting from the plan of subdivision was assessed to be less traffic than generated by the hospital. And these traffic levels are considered acceptable by city staff without need for further study. Servicing and stormwater will be reviewed through the submission of detailed development plans for adequacy and adherence to council and city standards. These detailed plans will be required via conditions of draft approval. The zone change application proposes to rezone the subject lands, as I said, from existing R2 and R3 zones to alternative R2 and R3 zones to facilitate the draft plan of subdivision. Within the special provisions proposed, the applicant has requested a minimum front yard depth of 4.5 meter to the dwelling with 6 meters to the garage. So potentially the garage will be set back 1.5 meters further than the main portion of the dwelling. And this allows people to park in front of their dwelling without being on the street and within the garage to meet the required off-street parking. The applicant further proposed a maximum lot coverage of 50% for all housing types proposed for the lands. This lot coverage has also been implemented through the city's recent subdivisions. The building department has raised concerns that the applicant has not specified this lot coverage if it's intended to be for the main building only or for the main building and accessory structures. Staff recommend that this provision be clear that 50% lot coverage is for all buildings and structures, recognizing that if the main building is constructed at 50%, then accessory buildings will not be permitted on the lot. So the concern with the building department in this area is that sometimes that if you build your house to 50% and 50% is what's permitted in the maximum lot coverage, you can't have a shed for your lawnmower, things like that. So sometimes we've specifically broken out those lot coverages, say 45% for the principal building, and then you have that extra 5% for any sheds or other structures that you might need on your property. On most of the parts within the draft plan, so parts 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, on plate 3 in my attached report, the applicant has proposed a minimum rear yard depth of 6.5 meters. The rear yard depth is a requirement for residential development as per the city's zoning bylaw, and it's generally 7.5 meters in all of the low density residential zones. And it's established to make sure that there's enough space for drainage, amenity space, accessory structures, things like that. Planning staff and building staff have concerns over the proposed lot depth, and building in particular's experience with the lot depth is that the reduction doesn't leave a lot of amenity space once you put in your shed and things like that. On part 5 of the draft plan, again in plate 3, the applicant has requested a minimum lot depth of 21 meters. Similar to reduced rear yard depths, the proposed lot depth ensures that you have enough space for drainage, amenity spaces, things like that. In this case, staff are able to support it, and the reason is that it's related to the park area, which is in the southeastern portion of the proposed subdivision. So it's not actually part of the subdivision lands, but was previously severed out and is intended to become a park area. So even though those lots are deeper, it's because of the existing lot fabric, and because the rear yard will become part of a park. Sort of the conflicts that you would come up with having a shortened rear yard aren't there, or aren't as prominent when your backyard is a park rather than another neighbor. So you don't need as much space potentially for drainage. You don't have the impacts of being that much closer to your neighbors. So staff are able to support it on that limited basis of the backyard being the park. Regarding part 6, the applicant is proposing a text amendment to define the park boundary as the side yard for any affected lots. This request is intended to ensure that setbacks from the park boundary reflect the proposed orientation of future lots and should maintain adequate setbacks for drainage, grading, and maintenance and access. In light of the foregoing, staff are satisfied that the proposed development is consistent with the policy of the PPS, is in keeping with the intent and purpose of the official plan. As such, staff are satisfied that the application can be given favorable consideration with the exception of the requested reduced minimum rear yard depths and lot depths. Or rear yard depths only, that should read. Staff support the zone change with the removal of the request for alternative rear yard depths. The previously noted agency comments have been addressed. They've either been addressed or they're also recommended in conditions of draft plan approval. I believe there's 26 of them where appropriate, and they've been provided for your consideration.
Thank you. Are there any questions of council? Councillor Schadenberg?
Yeah, from the chair through to our planner, I guess the first question being, of all the single homes that are planned on this facing either Vincent or Brant Street, will any or all of them be allowed to have ARUs, in other words, basement apartments?
So through the chair, we're still undergoing the ARU policy development phase. Depends how much parking is available. So if we've created a single driveway width where the garage is moved to within 6 meters, that only leaves you parking space within. So if it's a single car garage, you can't provide adequate parking for an ARU because you'll require to have an additional parking space. So if it's the case that there's only a single car garage, there will not be the opportunity for an ARU unless the applicant comes to council or I guess potentially committee of adjustment for an amendment to those policies.
Next question is, will the builder or developer be required to build a fence all the way around the park? So when you're looking at someone's backyard, that determines their lot line in essence because the park has been fully fenced?
Through the chair, I don't believe that's something we've requested as a draft plan condition. It typically is when we get to the detailed submission. I don't know if we're there, we've discussed that, but it is typically something that's included.
And the townhouses in block number 28, will they all have frontage onto Riddell Street? Or will there be a bit of a complex there where you can kind of drive in and drive out? Because if they're all frontage on the Riddell Street, they're gonna have extremely deep backyards.
So through the chair, we haven't received that level of detail yet. Perhaps when Len gets up, he can give you a better option. I would assume because he's included those are townhouses and the rest he's concluded that they're street fronting townhouses, that they will have some sort of internal network where there are more townhouses inside of there rather than just the street fronting ones.
We'll ask Mr. Reeves when he comes up, I guess, but the new street A that's proposed, when you say, for example, in block number 25, that they're on-street townhouses proposed, those could be proposed to face the brand new street A,
Through the
as
chair.
opposed to facing Riddell Street.
That's right, yes.
Are there any other questions of council? Hearing none. Thank you. Is the applicant or representative? Here?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me answer Mark first of all. The block coming out onto Riddell Street, I originally proposed that for about 30 suites of senior housing, 4-story building. Planners turned me down cold. Didn't want it, didn't like it. So we're back to townhouses. That's the bottom line on that. Did you have another question on access? Because the access, all the parking, the townhouses would be parallel to Riddell Street. I'm sorry, perpendicular to Riddell Street. In-house parking on the site and only a driveway off Wellington. It's not my preference. I preferred the 4-story senior building, but that got axed really quickly. I went through the planning report, Madam Chair. I have no concerns. I'm happy. If there's any questions, I'm happy to ask them.
Thank you. Are there any questions of council through to Mr. Reeves? No. Any questions there that you need answered? No? Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're letting me off easy,
I
Madam
am-
Chair.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak against the application? Doesn't look like there's anyone here. Or is there any questions that anyone has? You look like you're hesitating. Okay, hearing none, this will all be heard on Thursday at Thursday's council and the decisions will be made. And thank you all for coming. And we'll call for an adjournment. And then second. Yes. And second by. All in favor? Aye.